All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As you know, my name's Justin. I've been communicating with many of you via email, so it's nice to correspond somewhat face to face. I've seen all your admission videos, of course. So I'm joined here today with my colleague, Maria Brennan. She is from the International Student Office. And we're going to be providing information related to the visa application process and kind of the steps that you'll be taking and moving forward from here. So I just wanted to also mention that you, and I see people have been uh, already communicating in the Google Hangout chat. So I'll be monitoring that myself. And if you can try and keep the questions and chatter kind of specific to the webinar, but I'll try to answer questions if they're simple, while Maria's talking, but hopefully you can kind of focus on the webinar, and I'll pose some questions as well if I think they'd be good for the larger group. Also, if I don't get to questions, I'll review the thread after the fact, and I'll follow up with everyone and get everyone the answers that they need. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Maria.
Thank you, Justin. So congratulations to all of you. The purpose of this webinar this morning is we're going to go over the legal component of the admissions process. You've all been academically admitted, and congratulations. Now we're going to get to the second part, where you will apply for what is called a certificate of eligibility. It could be an I-20 or a DS 2019, and you take that to the US consulate and apply for your visa. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a PowerPoint presentation Maria will be speaking over, so I'm just going to switch to that.
Thank you, Justin. So as you can see, you have a choice. There are two types of visas. There's the F1 and the J1. The majority of our students, I would say more than 80% of the students, choose the simple F1 student visa. It's a non-immigrant visa. And when you actually go to the US consulate to apply for the visa, they will ask you what are your future intentions. And since it's a non-immigrant visa, you will have to show your ties to home, that you live in the family home, or you have your own apartment, or you may be going back to a job, or things can change in the future. However, when they're giving you the visa, they base it on the fact that you do not have intention to immigrate. So the F1, if you're applying for an F1 visa, the simpler of the two, you will apply for an I-20 form from our office, the International Students Office at MIT. All incoming students who are not legal US permanent residents or citizens are required to apply for a certificate of eligibility, that is the I-20 in this case, including citizens of Canada. Canadians will enter the US and get the status at the port of entry, at the border as they enter the United States. They will present the I-20 there. They are, however, exempt from having to go to the US Embassy and applying for the visa. But in all respects, they will hold the very same student status as non-Canadian international students. So in order to get an I-20, you will upload documents on IMIT, and I will show you a picture of that in a moment. You will be required to show sufficient funding. You will upload documents like your letter of admission, copy of your passport, and the documentation of funding. Now, with the I-20 and F1 visa, the funding can be from any source. It can be personal funds, it can be company funds, it can be family funds, government funds, from any source. There are no limitations, unlike the J. That's one of the main differences between the two. Dependents will apply for an F2 visa, spouses or children. Of course, a marriage certificate is needed. It is important, though, dependents are and will always be ineligible to apply for any type of work permission, either on campus or off campus. What is interesting about the F2, and they sort of relaxed the regulations about this, dependents can study part-time in a degree program, never full-time. But the newer thing is now they can study toward a degree, again, part-time. I emphasize just in case there's any misunderstanding. SCM students would not be eligible for curricular practical training. It's a type of work permission because the program is very short. In fact, students will not be eligible to apply for any off-campus work permission during the program because you need to be in F1 status for 2 full academic semesters to be eligible to apply for off-campus work permission. Now, curricular practical training is one type of work permission. It is usually done during the program. And since you're only here 9 months, there is no possibility of applying for the curricular practical training because by the time you complete your degree, only then could you apply for work permission. You could, in fact, apply for optional practical training. All students upon completion of their degree are eligible to apply for 12 months optional practical training, which is work required to be directly related to the major, and that would start after you have your degree. It is important to note any student who completed a master's in the US and applied for optional practical training, the 12 months, would not be eligible for a second 12 months after this master's. There's only 12 months optional practical training after each degree level, 12 months after bachelor's, 12 months after master's, and 12 months after PhD. But again, if you had done it after a master's in the past, you would not be eligible. It's important to know too that your degree is actually makes you STEM eligible. Now, the STEM OPT extension is 2 more years of work permission after the 12 months optional practical training. And upon completion of your degree and the 12 months OPT, you would be eligible to apply for 24 months more of work permission under the STEM extension. J1 students, J1 is another student visa, and we would issue what is known as a DS 2019 form. There are restrictions with the J. One of the advantages of the J, in fact, is that the spouse could actually apply for work permission. It's not automatic, but they are eligible, unlike the F2. The J2 can apply, as I said, for work permission. Funding is restricted. 51% or more of the funding must come from a source that is not personal or family funds. Loans are considered personal funds and cannot be used to fulfill the J1 requirement. Dependents are eligible, as I said, to apply for work permission and study, of course, part-time or full-time, actually, the J2, unlike the F in terms of full-time. J1 students are eligible to apply for 9 months of academic training upon completion of their degree. The last point is quite important. It's the 212E that refers to the 2-year home residency requirement. Students who apply for a J1 and enter the US and study on that visa could potentially be subject to the 2-year home residency requirement under any one of the following three conditions. Number one, if you had US government funding, like a Fulbright, you would be subject to the 2 years and it could never be waived. If you had your home government funding, you could be subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. And last but not least is the skills list. There are some countries that have a skills list, and if this engineering type is on the list for your country, you would be subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. To understand that is as follows. The 2-year home residency requirement means that you could not come back on an employer-sponsored visa, like an H1, L1, or you couldn't change to US permanent residency if you were subject to the 2-year home residency requirement without first having fulfilled that requirement. So many students whose countries have skills list, it really is not a popular visa. And of course, the funding is restrictive. 51% or more must come from non-personal family funds. Thank you. So the schedule of expenses, this is more or less accurate. I did it quickly on Friday evening, but I'm, Justin, if you see anything that's not quite right, just let me know. So the expenses will follow more or less as this. Tuition for 9 months, I believe, is $74,968. Health insurance for 9 months, it is required by law that you actually have health insurance for the entire duration of your stay. You should actually have health insurance upon arrival in the US before your MIT health insurance kicks in. You are required to show the MIT cost of health insurance, as you will be automatically enrolled in that, but not from your arrival date. And again, Justin will inform you about what date exactly that can start. There is a student activity fee for 2 semesters, which is half that 312. Immigration requires that you show evidence of living expenses for the student for 9 months, and we estimate that to be approximately $2,935 per month. If you're bringing a dependent, a spouse or a child, it'll be an additional sum of $8,874. This is required by the law. And additional expenses for the first child, $6,000. Might be a little less because I think that's estimated for 12 months, and $3,500 for each additional child. So the funding sources, the documentation that we accept for you to upload is as follows. If you're uploading documentation of personal funds, we need a dated and legible bank statements. Sometimes they're not quite clear, and we do require that they are clear. We want the funding in a current account in US dollars, ideally, with the name of the account holder in English characters on bank stationery with the name and address of the bank. This is a requirement by immigration law. Now, you only have to upload copies of these documents. You will be taking the originals with the I-20 or the DS-2019 to the US Embassy or Consulate. We will not accept bonds, stocks, or fixed assets, or projected current or projected income. It needs to be in a savings account, current account. And that's what the consular officer will be looking for. We do accept loans. They qualify as personal funds, and they do not, as I said before, meet the J1 requirement. Family funds, we will accept bank statements, again, as described above, with English characters for the name of the bank account holder, the date of issuance of the letter. And we would also require a very short letter from the bank account holder, the family member's name who's documenting this. A letter should state that they're willing to support you, the student, for in the sum of, and if they could name the sum in US dollars, I'd appreciate it. We will also accept company funding. If you have letters on letterhead from companies, organizations, governments, loans, awards, scholarships, etc., they're all acceptable. But again, they have to be on letterhead. Again, specify the amount in US dollars if possible, with the beneficiary's name in English letters. If dependents are supported by another source, in other words, if you have company funding and it doesn't mention the dependents, we would then need additional personal bank statement to support the dependents, the spouse or the children or both. Documents cannot be any older than 6 months when you upload them, and also take them to the US Embassy. It's important to know that. And again, the name of institution, etc. If there's a shortfall in your uploading, if the documentation of funding doesn't quite meet the amount, it's going to delay the issuance of your I-20. It's very easy to do it if it meets the amount. There's no need to add additional funding. In fact, it's easier for us to issue a document if you put in the exact amount required. You can take large bank statements to the US consulate if you wish, if you want to show that you have more than sufficient funding. But for our purposes, you should enter on the e-form just the required amount, the minimum amount. The bank account can show more, but when you enter on the e-form on IMIT, which we'll show you. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Maria. We had one question I would pose to you regarding this topic. So if students have funds in a saving account and show the fund availability in the account along with the supporting documents, is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Yeah, a savings account is fine. It's not locked in like a bond in any way or has a future maturity date before after the start date of the program. Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. The Kerberos ID. Do you want to speak to that, Justin? Do they already have the Kerberos ID?
Sure. So yes, students at this point have had the opportunity. I believe everyone has created their Kerberos ID and their email address. So everyone has an MIT email address at this point.
Good. Oh, thank you. So once you have your Kerberos ID and email address, you can go to IMIT. Well, actually, it's a little too soon. We won't be issuing documents probably till April because it's a September admit. But once you get the go-ahead from Justin, we'll let him know when is a good time. You can access IMIT. That is the International Students Office at MIT. It's the portal where you will upload everything. So you will need your passport, your letter of admission, all the funding documentation. If you have a marriage certificate, if you're bringing a spouse, then you will upload all those on IMIT. You may already have received instructions on logging in to Full Client Services, which is our portal. When entering your name, please enter your name exactly as it appears in your passport in the machine-readable section. I think, and enter all names. Can we go down a little further, Justin, to the next slide and see, do I have a picture of that? Next one, that's the MIT portal, right. So if you see, this is, that's Tim, the MIT Beaver. the mascot. So if you see the second last line at the very end, P is for passport. The PRT in this case would be for Portugal. And the last name of the student here is Sanchez. Now, in this case, the person has a double barrel last name. It's Sanchez Alvarez. The one bracket in the middle shows that those two names are the last name. If you move after Alvarez, you will see two double brackets. That separates the first name from the last name. And we would really like if you looked at that section when entering that on IMIT on the e-form. We need all names. You will have difficulty applying for the visa, and MIT won't issue the ID card if there's confusion. So I think that's fairly clear there. Can we go back? Yeah, thank you. So please enter your name exactly as it appears in your passport, as I said, in the machine readable section below your identity photo in your passport, and enter all names. Dual citizens can only enter one citizenship, and that will be the citizenship on the passport on which you plan to travel. So there's no point in entering two citizenships. Only one is relevant, again, on the passport on which you plan to travel. Do not enter any PO numbers in the address section. Foreign characters only get jumbled in our system. So again, if you go to the machine readable section of the identity page on your passport, you will see if your name has an accent, you will see if in English we sometimes may spell that slightly differently, but it'll be noted there. Either ways, if you have any questions, you can always email me. My email is Maria B, it was on the front, mariab@mit.edu. And then you'll hit upload your documents and hit submit. Don't forget to sign it electronically before submitting. Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that I'll follow up at the very least with Maria's information. As far as information that I've sent that she referenced, this is actually the first time that we're presenting this information in a webinar for the incoming residential students. So it's a little earlier than normal. So again, as I've been promising everyone, I'll be sending out more information about a variety of topics next week. So we're still kind of putting together some of the information, unrelated to this topic, actually. So at the very least, I'll follow up in a week with more information, but the actual processing and submission of documents isn't until April 15th.
Yes.
So just wanted to make that clear that we're doing this now, but it's kind of just so you have this information well in advance to prepare for a month or so from now.
Yeah, it takes time anyway to get bank statements, exactly how you want them, etc. Yeah.
And we did have one follow-up question related to the financial piece. Would a fixed deposit be counted as well, a liquid account?
No, if it's fixed, no. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it has to be in a current or savings account.
Okay.
Or else it would have to have a maturity date before the start date of the program. Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, I'll just in general ask if there's any more specific questions about your specific financial situation. Maybe just follow up in an email to me and or Maria afterwards, and we can kind of address that. So, all right, we'll move on.
Thank you. So IMIT looks more or less like this. And if you go to admissions, your name will be there and your student ID. And there's the F1 application for new student and the J1 application for new student. Actually, on reflection, it wouldn't be wise of students to apply for the J1 because they would only be eligible for 9 months academic training, whereas with the F1, they would get the 12 months optional practical training plus the 24-month STEM extension. Just throwing that in there. Okay, it looks like that. Going ahead. Thank you. We've seen that, yep. Transfer students currently in the US will be able to have, who are completing a degree here, will be able to have their SCMr record transferred to MIT. It's important to do this if you can, because you will be using, or rather we will be picking up the same SCMr ID number, and therefore you would not have to pay a new SCMr fee. The other students, once you receive the I-20, they need to go online and pay the SCMr fee to the government before they make their appointment at the US consulate or embassy. Okay. How long does it take? Well, I always tell the students it's entirely up to you. Once we open the portal for you, April 15th, it's up to you if the documents are correct. And again, how long does it take to get a visa? Well, that depends entirely on what country you're applying for the visa in. It varies from country to country. I would not have that information, but we will issue them about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of you uploading the request. And the document is sent out by Federal Express mail, and you will have it within 2 weeks, again, if all the documentation is correct. We advise you, we will send you actually the SCMr ID number in an email once the document has been issued, and it's up to you if you want to make an appointment with the US Embassy or Consulate. That we should get it out to you within a week or so, once, so allow for that before you make the actual appointment. You will be able to pay the SCMr fee online, which is required before the appointment. We also recommend that you do not purchase your flight before you have the visa. You never know, there could be delays. There could be a delay for administrative processing. You really won't know until you actually do that. So you want, at least if you do buy a ticket, make sure that you can change the travel date without too much overhead. If you plan to come to the US to visit MIT, to look at housing or to speak with the program office, and if you plan to come and return home, it is really mandatory that you come on a tourist visa. You will not be allowed to enter the US on the F1 visa any earlier than 30 days before the start date. And when you enter on the F1 visa, you are required to register within that time. If you were to come beforehand as a tourist, you would be coming in to take a look only and then leaving again. So, and you would need, it's complicated, but you would not be able to register at MIT on a tourist visa. You must maintain the student status. Again, I said when you're applying for the visa, it's a non-immigrant visa. You will have to maybe ask to show evidence that you do plan at this point to return home. As I said, things can change, and but it's in your interest to show your plans to return home. OPT is a benefit, and it's not exactly part of the visa application, so it's at this point it's not relevant to discuss. You're coming here, your primary purpose is to come here to study and get your degree. And again, I'm emphasizing you can only enter the country within 30 days. I've seen students who arrived on day 30 have a problem, so give it a day or two, within 29 or 28 days. Sorry, I have an old date there, September 4th. Actually, I think registration day is September 3rd this year.
Yes.
I think Reg Day, that would be
that is correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's Tuesday, September 3rd. Again, disclaimer, I'll be going over this at some point soon / in the future. But yes, that is the
If students want to come in though for, you know, orientation that you're having, they need to have health insurance before the MIT health insurance kicks in. That's the law. That's immigration law.
Yep. So as everyone is aware, I'm sure our orientation begins Thursday, August 15th. So again, I'll be following up with more information about that health insurance situation next week.
Good. That's very helpful. Thank you. Students too, if you students who plan to enter the US and then go on a short trip abroad to Mexico or Canada, you have to remember they're foreign countries. Again, you'd have the same problem with your F1. You know, if you're not coming in to study within the 30 days, if you're coming in actually to go on vacation somewhere else, that would be a problem. You'd have to come in as a tourist and then come in the second time on your student visa. I have the MBA program there. Okay. Change of status. Students currently in the US can apply for a change of status. If you're in the US currently on an H1 or an L1 and want to change your status, you should remember the following, that it's now actually, I need to update that, it's taking between 12 and 18 months for a change of status approval. So if you're here on an H or an L, my recommendation is to return home and apply for the visa. Otherwise, you will not get the status change before the end date of the program. It's also possible for individuals here who are working on H1s or L1s, if they are going to continue with their company and maintain their H status, they are eligible to work or to study full-time, providing we get a letter from the company's legal counsel stating that full-time study is allowed under your current visa sponsorship. And again, you should upload copies of those documents. If you're going to continue in H or L or one of those visas, we still need you to upload copies of the documents, plus a letter from the legal counsel saying that it's within the regulations of that visa for you to study full-time.
All right, so that concludes the PowerPoint portion of our presentation. So I just wanted to briefly address the supply chain management proof of funding requirement that was requested of you upon your admission. So again, we have this policy and this requirement as almost a way to prepare you for this process. So we somewhat and try to a certain extent, model it after the requirements for the visa. So in theory, some of the documents that you did submit to us / me can be used and resubmitted for this process. But I just want to put the disclaimer in that you know, I didn't go through with a fine-tooth comb. So just because I accepted it doesn't mean that they are necessarily according to these exact rules and regulations. So this process is entirely separate. So anything that you previously submitted isn't going to be transferred or used in any way for this process. So I just wanted to clarify that. I saw one question. I'm just going to read it real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to read it. If a student applies for an F1 in May and gets approved, but they can't enter the US until August, can they still go apply for a tourist visa while having a valid F1?
Yes, I mean, I don't see why not. Many people have a different visa on every page of their passport. Um, but you can only activate one at any one time. Upon entry, it gets activated. The immigration officer will ask you, what is the purpose of your trip? And if you have a tourist visa on your passport, you will say, well, I'm coming in for a few days and then I'm leaving. I mean, I cannot be sure, that they would think it a little odd to be applying within the same short period for two different types of visas. I mean, if I were you, I'd apply for the tourist visa and say you're going to visit the US and then apply for the F1 afterwards. Not quite sure, but yeah, it's possible. As I say, students have many different types of visas in their passport, but when they come in to study, they study an F, and that should not change until they've completed everything related to their studies, including the optional practical training and the STEM extension. You cannot go visa hopping once you enter the country in the student status.
All right, great. Another question that
Yes.
came in. So for students who are living abroad, but in not necessarily their country of citizenship, can they apply for the visa from their current country of residence?
Right. If you have a residence and you show proof that you're residing there and working there, there's no reason why they wouldn't give you a visa. Students do it all the time. It may take a little longer, a little bit, because they'd want clearance from the home country. But yes, students do it all the time if you have proof of residence.
Great. So one of the students specifically is coming to the US on a tourist visa in April.
Yeah.
That's kind of already set in motion. So is this going to affect his application for the F1 visa?
Not at all. That's perfectly fine. And as you enter the country, they will ask you, what is the purpose of your trip? That's always the main question. You say, I'm coming in. I'm not coming in to study. Well, yeah, you're coming in just to tour or to make inquiries or to come and visit MIT only as a visitor. No, that would not at all affect your F1 application.
Great. So I'll keep my eye out for any last minute questions, but at this time I will wrap up the session. We're ending a little bit early. As we mentioned, or I mentioned, I will follow up in an email immediately after this, at the very least, with Maria's contact information. Again, I think most of you are picking up through our email conversation. You know, I'm a liaison between you and a lot of the different departments here at MIT that you'll ultimately be interacting with over the next few months and during your time here. So again, like, I have a basic knowledge of this process and I work with Maria, but definitely if you can try and direct questions, towards her. She's a resource for us. She's great. And, again, I am here. I can always filter questions to Maria. So we'll hopefully get everyone up and running and ready for April 15th. We have a few more questions. So if there's a student with an H-1B visa pending for approval, does that affect an F1 visa application?
Well, depending an H1 approval, does that affect? Well, I think once you leave the country to apply for the F, you're going to abandon the H1. So you need to talk to your legal counsel right now. As I said, if you leave the country with the pending H, I believe you abandon the visa. So or send me an email, and if you want to explain a little more to Maria B at MIT, and I will take a look at your exact situation and try and advise you. Are you, and what is your, if an H is pending, what is your current status?
I think maybe we'll table that one for a
Right.
private conversation. So just email us. The next question is kind of applicable to travel in general, which we discussed. So if someone wants to travel to Canada, for instance, while they're here enrolled in the program under their F1 visa, can they apply for a Canadian visa? Do they need a visa to travel to Canada? What are...
Right. So from the US immigration perspective, once you're here in a student visa and enrolled in classes, there's a space on page 2 of your I-20 for re-entry from travel. So you can travel every weekend to any country you want in the world from the US immigration perspective. Now, the regulations for the Canadians, for all the other countries, is something that you would have to contact the Canadian consulate or go to their website. I mean, it varies from country to country. We wouldn't be familiar with Canadian immigration rules. We're giving you US immigration rules. So go to the website and see if your country requires a visa or not.
All right, great. All right, so like I said, I think we're going to wrap up today's session, but we are here as a resource for you moving forward, and look out for an email from me later today. And then the larger, more expansive email next week regarding some other processes such as housing, etc. So thanks everyone for being here, and I look forward to further correspondence and meeting you all in August. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.